Next up in the phase, moving on to chapter 10, which is about application. And this chapter is essentially getting at how you can utilize the phase space and these different dreaming states to your advantage. And so he writes, the phase phenomenon is wrapped up in a thick layer of prejudices and stereotypes, which often have no bearing on the reality. The primary purpose of this chapter is to precisely separate reality from fiction. Its second purpose is to provide a detailed description of what may be obtained from the practice. Every practical application of the phase is based on three qualities. 1. Application based on translocation and finding objects, which we just covered in the previous videos and in the last chapter, so I'm going to hammer through that part super quick and just throw it into the end of this video. 2. Application based on obtaining information, and I put a ton of highlights in that part of the chapter, so we'll see how many videos it takes for me to get through that. And then 3. Application based on the phase's ability to impact a practitioner's physiology. Whether everything described in this chapter occurs in reality or is merely simulated makes no difference in terms of the encountered sensations. And this is a little bit off topic, but it's something I like to think about. Like in waking reality, right, we have our senses that are picking up this data from the outside world, bringing it into our brains, and then our brains interpret that and give us this lived experience. And in a way, like, I don't know if I would say it's more real, but it's definitely more direct. Like when you're within these phase spaces and, dreaming states, because you're perceiving everything directly, and this is if you have the general point of view that everything is taking place locally within your own head, right? Then it's just that much closer because you don't have to take this outside information, interpret it, and then get the experience. It's all happening right there locally in your own head. But I say that having recently had my beliefs kind of really pushed against as I've been digging into all this remote viewing stuff, where like, man, if a lot of these, remote viewing greatest hits, like where they really were solid on it and finding people that were lost and all this other information and being able to see what was on some CIA guy's desk, if that stuff is real, then, there very potentially might be something there. So, yeah, I've been having fun diving down that rabbit hole as of late. Anyway, so moving on to applications based on translocation and finding objects. So it can be used for traveling, obviously, right? You can go to anywhere you want in the world. You can travel to different times and go into the past or into the future. You can leave this world and go into outer space and go check out some other galaxies or whatever. You can travel to different worlds and go visit like alien civilizations, parallel dimensions, or even any stories or places that are written about in books, literature, and movies, right? You can go to versions of those worlds as well. It can also be used for encounters, whether that be with relatives, acquaintances, celebrities, historical figures, gods even. And then, of course, you can visit with like the dead or the deceased and, versions of what could be their spirits. And then realizing desires. And this is probably the main way most of these phase spaces and lucid dreams tend to get used, at least at first, right? Where you can use it to have the experience of flying or have the experience of having superpowers. He even has an example in here of swimming in a pile of money, kind of like Scrooge McDuck style. And then, of course, sexual desires, right? Where, there are no limits. You can basically do whatever you want. So, anything can happen there. And then the last one he covers is alternatives to the virtual world, which is kind of getting at like video game stuff. And you know me, man, I really, really love my video games. But instead of, just playing this PS5 game, I can actually have the experience of, being in that world. And now, granted, a lot of these video game worlds are probably not places you'd want to live. Like I've been playing Space Marines 2, the new Warhammer game. Fun game, but man, that world is the most like war-torn, crazy, insane world ever. So I would definitely not want to live there, but get the experience of being one of these Ultramarines and running through there and smoking all these aliens, in like the first-person view. If I was doing that in my dream, that would probably be kind of fun. Anyway, with that said, that will wrap it up. And then in the next video, we'll be moving on to obtaining information and using the phase for problem solving.